But first of all, Newcastle look to have made a significant breakthrough in the transfer market with a £55 million deal agreed with Nottingham Forest to sign Anthony Elanga. For more on that now, we can cross live to Newcastle and join our reporter Keith Downey. Morning, Keith. Newcastle have needed a right winger for a while, haven't they? And they've had a few near misses in the transfer market of late. How confident should the fans be that this one's going to happen?
Yeah, it looks like they've got their man in the shape of Anthony Elanga. As you allude to there, of course, they were keen on Brian Mbeumo and João Pedro, who could, I guess, play that position as well. But they have been frustrated so far in their abilities to try and bring in a new player this summer. But it looks as though they've got their man in the shape of Anthony Elanga for £55 million. We understand he will travel to the northeast later today to begin his medical and put the finishing touches to that transfer. That after Newcastle yesterday agreed that £55 million transfer fee with Nottingham and Forest. And as you rightly say, brings a player to the club who they have wanted, a player who's got friends in the club in the shape of Will Asula and Alexander Isak, and a player who will be able to play that right wing position where there's been a real heavy load on Jacob Murphy over the last couple of seasons. But his goals and his assists last season, the third highest assist maker in the Premier League, is what's attracted Eddie Howe, and Newcastle look to have got their man. So it's moving pretty quickly, this one, but we expect that medical to begin either later on today or early tomorrow as Newcastle look to sign their first player of this summer transfer window.
And once that's done, Keith, is that going to get things moving a bit with Newcastle? What other business do you expect them to do?
Yeah, look, I don't know if that's going to have a knock-on effect with other arrivals. I think it's fairly common knowledge that Newcastle have been looking to add in a number of positions this summer. They're looking to bring in a striker to compete with Alexander Isak, hence why they were interested in João Pedro. But of course, the Brazilian chose to move to Chelsea instead. So I do expect them to bring in a striker. And obviously, with the news yesterday that Callum Wilson was set to move on and not renew his contract, that increases the need to bring in another striker. So I think a forward will be brought in addition to Anthony Elanga. I don't think there's any knock-on effect from Elanga's imminent arrival. They're also looking to bring in a right-sided central defender. You'll remember last summer they tried and failed on multiple occasions to sign Mark Guéhi from Crystal Palace. They're still interested in him and a number of other central defenders. And they want to bring in a goalkeeper as well. We've been telling you for a couple of weeks now that they've been locked in talks with Burnley over a move for their goalkeeper, James Trafford. I think it's close to pretty much being agreed on the personal sense for the players. I think he would be keen for a move here, but Newcastle and Burnley have yet been able to come to any sort of agreement. But I do expect Newcastle to bring in a goalkeeper, a right-sided central defender, and a forward to augment that imminent arrival of Elanga, which, as I say, we expect later on today. But with any transfer business now, with PSR hovering in the background, it's so important for clubs to sell as it is to buy. And Newcastle have been caught out last summer. They want to make sure they don't get themselves into that situation again, and that is why they're close to agreeing a sale of Sean Longstaff, the central midfielder who's been at the club for just under 20 years. He came through the academy. He's been a big player in the last couple of years, but Newcastle and Leeds United are very close to an agreement of £12 million for the 27-year-old midfielder, a player who has just 1 year left on his contract and wants to play more regular football. He struggled for game time in the second half of last season, struggled to usurp the likes of Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes in that midfield. I think there's an understanding there from the club that they'd like to get some money for the player, and an understanding from the player himself that he'd like to go on and play football, and Leeds United have showed some concrete interest in him. So too, I'm told, have Everton over the last couple of days, but it sounds as though the Leeds United deal is close and Sean Longstaff is set to part ways from Newcastle after almost 20 years at the club, at the same time as £55 million Anthony Elanga arrives, and remember that £55 million that Newcastle are set to spend on Elanga will represent a second highest club record. Alexander Isak, his compatriot, arrived 2 years ago for 63 million. Elanga, the same fee, 55 million, that Newcastle paid AC Milan for Sandro Tonali a couple of years ago. So big business for Newcastle, a big move for them, and a player they've been keen on for some time.